Sometimes, behind the quietest moments in life, lie things you could never even imagine. A beach trip, an old device, or just a few new faces. Everything seems fine, until suddenly it's not. 3 stories, 3 true events, and one thing they all have in common: danger is always close, we just don't see it. This happened a few months ago, during springtime. It was that weird transitional phase in my life. I just graduated, had no real responsibilities yet, and way too much free time on my hands. I'd finished school a semester early, which had felt like a smart move when I was drowning in coursework. But once I finally had all that free time, I had no idea how to fill it. My full-time job didn't start until June, and most of my friends were still busy with classes or studying for finals. So I was just drifting, stuck in that awkward gap between 2 stages of life. Honestly, it felt pretty depressing and made me feel kind of useless. I'm the kind of person who needs to stay busy and productive, so doing nothing for days was slowly killing me inside. That's probably why I agreed when my mom asked me to check on my Uncle Rick's beach house. It was a simple favor. Drive down to Rehoboth Beach, check for any leaks or damage, and take care of some minor maintenance so Rick wouldn't have to hire someone. Oh, and for context, I'm from Pennsylvania, and Rick's place is in Delaware, so it was just a little over a 2-hour drive. The house itself is huge, big enough to comfortably fit my entire extended family during the summer. Every summer, our entire extended family, around 25 people, would pack into that house. We'd play games and drink way too much, honestly the only 2 traditions our family could really claim. The house isn't directly on the beach, but it's not far either. It sits in a quiet neighborhood filled with tall beach grass and winding roads, giving it a calm, almost isolated vibe. Now fast forward to a random weekday. I honestly don't remember which one, maybe a Thursday. I left in the late afternoon, which looking back, wasn't the smartest choice. The drive down was pretty smooth, and when I arrived, everything looked normal. I walked inside and went through Rick's checklist, checked the faucets, breakers, walked around the property. Everything was in good shape. But being there alone felt off. I'd never seen the house without games scattered around and relatives making noise with drinks in their hands. The silence was the weirdest part. It made the whole place feel abandoned, almost haunted. You know how some places, like a family favorite restaurant or a holiday house, are always full of energy when you're there with everyone? Now imagine that same place, completely quiet and empty. Creepy, right? It was getting late, and I absolutely hate driving at night. So I texted my mom to let her know I'd stay the night and leave in the morning. She agreed and reminded me to thank Uncle Rick for letting me stay, which I did. I made a quick meal, scrolled through my phone for a while, then started getting ready for bed. During family vacations, I usually ended up crammed into one of the tiny rooms on the 3rd floor, while my relatives claimed the spacious, more comfortable ones. I never really complained. It was just how things always worked out. But since I had the entire house to myself that night, I figured I might as well make the most of it. The master bedroom on the 2nd floor was an obvious choice. It had a private bathroom, a huge walk-in closet, and a bed so comfortable it felt like a luxury suite. There was no question about it. I was sleeping there. I got into bed around midnight and fell asleep pretty quickly. I'm not sure what time I woke up. All I know is that something jolted me out of sleep. I was still groggy, but I was absolutely certain I just heard a sound from inside the closet, like something had fallen, but without the usual crashing noise. I turned my head slowly toward the closet, and even that tiny movement made my heart race. My mind was alert, but my body wouldn't follow. It wasn't exactly sleep paralysis because I could technically move, I just didn't want to. I was too afraid. I didn't want to confirm what might be lurking in there. I shut my eyes tight and tried to convince myself to just go back to sleep. And I almost did, until I heard it again. A soft, muffled thump coming from the closet. I barely opened my eyes and tried telling myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew I hadn't imagined it. Then, suddenly, my body locked up completely. This time, it wasn't psychological, I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, even if I wanted to. And that's when the real fear set in. I had never truly known what it meant to be frozen in fear, until that moment. I lay there, horrified, as the closet door slowly creaked open. Through barely parted eyelids, I saw a shadowy figure step out into the room. It didn't move. It just stood silently next to my bed, staring down at me. Those 20 seconds felt like an eternity. Then, without making a sound, the figure turned and walked out of the room. I didn't dare move. I barely even breathed. I listened to the footsteps as they crossed the floor. But instead of going downstairs, like any normal intruder would, they began ascending the stairs, heading to the 3rd floor. My stomach dropped. There's only one staircase to the 3rd floor. No other way out. Whoever it was had just trapped themselves, unless they weren't planning on leaving. My brain screamed at me to do something, anything. But I was frozen, not because I couldn't move, but because I was terrified. I had no idea who the man was or if he had a weapon. I knew I couldn't take him in a fight. After what felt like hours of mental struggle, I finally snapped myself out of it. Quietly, I reached for my phone and called 911. When the dispatcher answered, I whispered as softly as I could that someone was in the house. Then I carefully slipped out of bed and locked the bedroom door behind me. I waited. Every second crawled by like an eternity. Then, finally, flashing red and blue lights filled the windows. I was stunned by how fast the police arrived. I bolted down the stairs and threw open the front door, practically collapsing in relief when I saw them. Without hesitation, they rushed inside and searched the house top to bottom. I waited outside, anxious and cold. They didn't take long to finish. When they came back out, they told me the house was empty. I couldn't believe it. I knew I'd heard those footsteps going up the stairs. There was no way out from up there. That meant the man had to still be inside, but somehow, he'd vanished. The police insisted I must have been so shaken up that I just didn't notice him leaving. But I knew the truth. He hadn't left. I just couldn't prove it. In that closet, of all places. Maybe he had heard me enter the house and just hid in the first spot he could find. I still have no idea how he even got inside. Rick doesn't know either. It's not like someone can just climb onto the roof from the ground, so that theory makes no sense. Ever since that night, my entire extended family has been urging Rick to upgrade the house's security. But for reasons I can't quite understand, he keeps refusing. What really haunts me, though, is the thought that if I had been sleeping in my usual room on the 3rd floor that night, things could have ended very differently. My friend Mike owns a beach house on the Jersey Shore, and calling it beautiful doesn't even begin to cover it. It's absolutely stunning. At least, to someone like me who didn't grow up with much, that's how it feels. I don't know all the details about its history. It's not my family's place. But from what Mike has told me, it's been in his family for generations. His grandparents had always hoped to live there full time, but sadly, they both passed away recently. Now, with no one living in it, the house mostly sits empty. Most of Mike's extended family lives out on the West Coast, and his parents are usually too tied up with work to spend any real time there. The silver lining, though, is that Mike basically has free reign to use the place whenever he wants. I think his dad originally planned to rent it out for extra income, but that hasn't really materialized. Honestly, it's tough to find tenants for a beach house in the off-season, so it's hard to fault him for that. Then, sometime in mid-July, Mike gave me a call and asked if I wanted to spend the weekend at the beach house, and I didn't need convincing. I had no plans, and the idea of relaxing at a nice beach house sounded perfect. His plan was simple: hang out during the day, maybe go to the beach, hit the boardwalk at night, and just enjoy a laid-back getaway. Nothing wild, no big party weekend, just a peaceful break from the everyday routine. I was actually really looking forward to it. Mike and I live close by, so he picked me up that Friday afternoon. I tossed my duffel bag into his trunk, and we hit the road. We got to the house around 6 p.m., brought our stuff up to the bedrooms, and settled in. The house had that familiar, slightly musty beach house scent, a mix of sea air and aged wood. Not unpleasant, though. It smelled like summers past, like the house had stories to tell. After a quick dinner from a nearby sub shop, we took a walk along the beach to soak in the evening. Mike had brought a couple of fishing rods, so we decided to cast a line for a while. Not that we expected to catch anything. It was more about being out there, unwinding. At one point, we ran into two girls around our age, barefoot and strolling along the shoreline. Mike, being his usual confident self, struck up a conversation. Turned out they were locals, or at least semi-locals, and the vibe was light, easy, and a little flirty. We got their numbers and went our separate ways. They kept walking, and we kept fishing. Despite it being peak season and still fairly busy, Mike knew all the quieter spots, hidden beach paths, little nooks between houses where the lights didn't reach. Eventually, we found a peaceful stretch of beach all to ourselves, with nothing but the wind and waves for company. It was one of those nights that helped you disconnect from reality for a while. The next morning, we woke up around 9 and decided to go for a jog along the boardwalk. It was already getting warm, but a nice breeze kept it from feeling too hot. The ocean breeze made the morning run tolerable. We didn't go too hard, just a couple of miles to wake ourselves up and get the blood flowing. Mike's pretty into fitness, and I've been trying to stay in decent shape, so it actually felt good to move after a night of lounging. The rest of the day drifted by without us even realizing it. That evening, Mike suggested maybe checking out a few bars and seaside. It sounded fun in theory, but we were both completely drained. The idea of waiting in long lines and shouting over loud music didn't exactly match the energy we had left after spending all day under the sun. So instead, we decided to just take it easy and turn in early. Sometime after midnight, I was jerked awake by a loud, shrill beeping. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but within a couple of seconds, I realized it was all too real. It sounded like a smoke detector going off, one of those sharp, high-pitched alarms that feels like it's drilling into your skull. I jumped out of bed and quickly scanned the room, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. It wasn't coming from anywhere on the second floor, and as I focused a bit more, it felt like it was actually coming from above us. Without a second thought, I flung open the bedroom door and rushed to Mike's room. I shook him awake with both hands, urgently telling him to come with me. He caught on immediately, and jumped up without even bothering to throw on a shirt. In a near panic, the two of us raced up the stairs like our lives depended on it. We had no clue what we were walking into as we headed up to the third floor. The hallway was mostly dark, lit only by a faint sliver of moonlight sneaking in through a small window at the far end. We flipped on the lights and began searching the area, fully expecting to see smoke, sparks, something. But there was nothing. No smell of fire, no heat, no flickering lights. It was completely normal, which somehow made it feel even weirder. For several frustrating minutes, we searched every corner trying to find the source of the piercing beeping. Finally, I spotted something odd in one of the bedrooms. There, neatly placed under a pillow, was a small black device. Before calling Mike into the room, I picked it up, curiosity pushing past the confusion. The object was about the size of a walkie-talkie, completely black, with a single red light blinking steadily on top. That was it. No branding, no screen, no buttons, just a smooth, matte casing and what looked like a switch on one side. I flipped the switch off, and instantly, the beeping stopped. Right then, Mike walked into the room. His eyes darted from the bed to the device in my hand. We locked eyes, both of us equally confused and clearly uneasy. After a pause, he asked me if I'd ever seen the thing before. I shook my head and asked him the same. He said no. We spent the next hour trying to figure out what the device was, how it had ended up under that pillow, and what could have possibly triggered it. But nothing made sense. Mike swore no one from his family had been in the house for months, and I believed him. I mean, why would he lie about something like that? You could argue maybe it was meant to be some kind of safety device or a janky smoke detector replacement, but that didn't add up either. There wasn't even a fire. The device didn't help prevent anything. The worst part? We still didn't know why it had gone off in the first place. Later, we were sitting silently in Mike's room, the atmosphere heavy with confusion, when a wild idea popped into my head. A sudden realization hit me, something that, in hindsight, should have been obvious. The switch on the device. I quickly grabbed the black box again and flipped the switch back on. Instantly, the high-pitched beeping blared to life. I shut it off just as fast. Mike and I both stood frozen. Then, in a hushed voice, he muttered, "Oh my God!" It hit us both at the same time. The only way that device could have been activated was manually. Which meant someone else had been in the house with us. We didn't hesitate. Mike immediately called the police while I locked the bedroom door and pushed whatever furniture I could find in front of it. Then we waited, every second dragging on like an eternity, until finally, flashing lights lit up the windows. We rushed downstairs to meet the officers and quickly explained everything. They asked us to stay outside while they did a full sweep of the house. When they came back down, the look on their faces told us we were right to be scared. They informed us that every single window on the third floor had been thrown wide open, including the tiny bathroom windows. But that wasn't all. The entire floor was in disarray. Beds flipped, drawers emptied, clothes and items scattered across the rooms. The same room where I had discovered the device, which had appeared perfectly untouched earlier, now looked completely trashed. Mike and I both felt like we were losing our grip on reality. The officers didn't find anyone inside. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, no weapons. After about 20 more minutes of checking and double-checking, they told us to make sure every window was locked from now on, and to call again if anything else seemed off. Then they left. We didn't feel safe. Not even close. Whoever had been in the house, whoever had planted that thing, was probably long gone. But how could we be sure? We agreed to stay the night, mostly because it was too late, and we didn't know where else to go. So we double-checked every door and window, tried to convince ourselves we were okay, and forced ourselves to sleep. Thankfully, nothing else happened. But even now, parts of that night don't make any sense. I still don't know how or why that device ended up under that pillow. And I can only imagine how much worse it must have felt for Mike, knowing it happened in his family's house. And honestly, a part of me still wonders, what if that person never actually left? This all took place a while ago, back when I was 22. Enough time has passed now that I finally feel comfortable talking about it. Life was good then. I had just graduated college, landed a solid job, and thanks to moving back in with my parents, my expenses were practically non-existent. Imagine stacking up serious savings while living rent-free, having meals covered, and staying in the room I grew up in, with my own car and every little comfort from my hometown still in reach. It was honestly a dream setup, and I knew how lucky I was. Not everyone gets that kind of support, and I never once took it for granted. But even the most comfortable lives can hide strange shadows. This story began not even a month after I'd moved back home. For context, I've never been the so-called party girl. I don't drink heavily, I avoid clubs, and I've never let guys influence how I live my life. My father's always been the most important man in my world, and hookup culture? It's just not for me. So my days were simple: caffeine, work, gym, reading, scrolling, and sleep. Weekends meant hiking, mini road trips, board games, whatever I felt like. But then, one weekend out of nowhere, my closest friend from college, Lindsay, invited me and two of our other friends, Sabrina and Thea, to spend a few days at her family's beach house. I'd never been before, but based on how Lindsay always described it, the place sounded like something out of a movie, peaceful, far from the tourist crowds, with its own private beach just steps from the water. To put it plainly, Lindsay's family is loaded. I think both of her parents are neurosurgeons, and when I finally saw the house for the first time, let's just say, it didn't disappoint. Sleek, modern, and so clean it almost didn't feel real. It honestly looked less like a beach home and more like some kind of high-security military base. I'd love to show you photos, trust me, I took plenty. But out of respect for Lindsay's family, and given everything that happened, sharing them wouldn't feel right. When we got there, the four of us grabbed our bags and headed inside, excited for a relaxing weekend. We quickly figured out the sleeping arrangements when we arrived. Lindsay's beach house had more than enough bedrooms for each of us to have our own space. But where's the fun in that? Instead, we all crammed into one of the kids' rooms. It had 2 sets of bunk beds and a private bathroom, so it was kind of perfect. By the time we hit night 3, I felt like that was the sweet spot, just enough time to enjoy each other's company before things started getting on anyone's nerves. I'll admit, I'm easily irritated if people aren't clean or courteous. Not that any of my friends aren't, but you get the idea. Now I know I mentioned earlier that I live a pretty low-key lifestyle, but this weekend felt like the right time to break that mold a bit. So yeah, I decided I was going to let loose, at least a little. Nothing crazy. Just enjoy the time with my friends. That first night, we kept things mellow. We made our way down to the private beach behind the house and settled into the sand for some stargazing. The 4 of us were sipping on White Claws, listening to house music on Sabrina's portable speaker, and just soaking in the night. That's when we noticed it, a faint, flickering light way down the shoreline. It caught our eyes immediately. The music quieted, the laughter softened, and all of us just watched. At first, we couldn't really tell what it was. It blinked on and off slowly, like something was swinging. Then it clicked. It wasn't some strange light in the distance. It was a flashlight. Someone, or maybe a few people, were walking along the shore with it. The beam swayed back and forth, steady and casual. Eventually, we could make out 3 or 4 silhouettes moving toward us. They weren't stumbling or acting erratic. Just walking. Calmly. As they got closer, we began to hear the sound of laughter. That put us at ease a little. Made us think it was probably just another group like us. Maybe locals, or other 20-somethings staying nearby. They definitely saw us sitting there, because just as they neared, one of the guys called out to us with a cheerful, "Hi!" His voice was friendly, probably around our age. Thea called back, and before long we were making casual small talk while they slowly made their way over. As they got close enough to see clearly, we realized it was 3 guys, maybe a year or 2 older than us. They had that classic, beach guy, vibe, sun-kissed hair, tank tops, confident smiles. The kind of look I could already tell my friends were eating up. Especially Thea. Now, Thea's always been a bit wild when it comes to guys. Nothing reckless, just bold. It's her thing. And to be fair, she's gorgeous. Like jaw-dropping gorgeous. So it's never surprising when guys immediately gravitate toward her. She knows I don't always love her choices, but it's nothing new between us. The guys brought beers and sat down with us, and honestly, it was a vibe. They weren't pushy or trying too hard. Just easygoing, funny, and fun to talk to. An hour slipped by fast. We were all a few drinks in, the conversation was flowing, and eventually they asked if we wanted to come back to their place. I was pretty wiped at that point. Honestly, I just wanted to go back and sleep. But I could tell the other girls, especially Thea, weren't ready to call it a night. They all seemed into the idea of hanging out more, and I didn't want to be the one to kill the mood. So I told them to go ahead and have fun, while I headed back to the house alone. There were 3 guys and 3 of them, and I had zero interest in any of it. It made sense. I walked back up to Lindsay's place while the others strolled further down the beach, disappearing into the dark, still laughing and chatting. Back at the house, I washed up and crashed. But sometime after 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a FaceTime call from Lindsay. It threw me off. She should have either been back by now or asleep wherever she was. Half asleep and confused, I answered in a groggy voice. And then she screamed. Screamed so loud and panicked it snapped me fully awake in a second. She was hysterical, shouting that Thea and Sabrina had been kidnapped, and that I needed to grab her car keys immediately. Her words hit me like a brick. It felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over my entire body. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I'd never felt fear or adrenaline like that in my life. I didn't waste a second, hands shaking. I yanked on whatever clothes were closest, bolted down the stairs, and grabbed my phone. I asked Lindsay why she called me instead of the police, and she quickly told me she had. She just needed my help too. Her voice was frantic, but she stayed focused, walking me through everything step by step. She told me to stay on the line, guided me through unlocking the gate, finding her car keys, and getting the hell out of there. In less than 5 minutes, I was in her car and speeding down the road, adrenaline completely taking over. She said they were about 10 houses down the beach to the left, so that's where I headed. As I drove, she described the car they were in and what direction they were heading. There wasn't a single car around, and I was flying. Way faster than I should have been. Honestly, it's a miracle I didn't get pulled over. I didn't even care. A few minutes later, I spotted a vehicle in the distance that matched Lindsay's description, crawling along like nothing was wrong. That's when I hung up with Lindsay and immediately called the police, giving them the exact location and direction. The dispatcher told me to stay back and avoid drawing attention. They didn't want to tip anyone off. So that's what I did. I followed at a distance, heart racing, white-knuckling the steering wheel. Then, finally, I saw flashing lights up ahead. Police cruisers. The car didn't speed up or try to escape, so I guess the guys inside didn't realize they were the reason for the stop. I pulled over on the side and watched from behind. It was complete chaos. The officers pulled all 3 men out of the SUV at gunpoint, shouting commands and slapping handcuffs on them. One by one, they were taken to the patrol cars. Then, one of the officers came walking over to me. An officer walked over to the trunk of the car, unlocked it, and slowly lifted it open. What we saw inside made my stomach drop. There they were, Thea and Sabrina. Bound. Gagged. Shaking. Their faces were bruised, clothes torn in places, eyes wide and terrified like they'd just been pulled out of a nightmare. It was the most horrifying moment of my life. They were alive. Thank God. But they were far from okay. Even after everything that happened, nothing could have prepared me for what they eventually told us. I asked them if I could share this part of the story, and they agreed, though none of them wanted to be the ones to write it down themselves. Honestly, I don't blame them. Here's the truth, as they lived it. After I left and went to bed, the group had kept drinking. Hard. But Lindsay, being a little more grounded since it was her family's place, stayed relatively sober. At some point, the guys suggested everyone split up and call it a night. Thea and Sabrina each went off with one of the guys. No red flags at first. It just felt like the night was winding down. Lindsay, meanwhile, made it clear she wasn't interested and told the third guy she was heading back. That's when things got weird. He got angry, not playfully, not flirtatiously, but genuinely pissed. She thought maybe it was just bruised ego, that he'd wanted to hook up, and was embarrassed, but his anger escalated quickly. He told her to get the hell out of the house. Yelled it. Fine by her. She stormed out. But halfway back, she realized she'd left her purse behind. Classic Lindsay. She cursed under her breath, turned around, and started walking back. And that's when she saw it. The other two guys were dragging Thea and Sabrina toward the SUV, their bodies limp, barely responsive. At first, Lindsay was too stunned to react. She thought maybe they were just too drunk, but the panic set in when she saw the way the guys were handling them. Throwing them into the back like they were luggage. No hesitation. No care. Then the car doors slammed, the engine started, and the SUV took off. That's when Lindsay called me, mid-sprint, shaking, crying, trying to explain what she'd just seen. The rest you already know. She called the police first, then me, and that was that. Thea's parents, both high-powered attorneys, wasted no time. They jumped through every legal hoop imaginable to make two things happen. Keep the entire incident as far from the public eye as possible, and ensure those guys received the maximum prison sentences allowed. They succeeded on both fronts. Turns out the house those men had been staying in didn't even belong to them. It was owned by an older couple who were vacationing abroad, completely unaware. That, along with a slew of charges, kidnapping, assault, unlawful entry, and more, was enough to put all three men away for a very long time. Still, I don't think any amount of prison time could ever really compensate for what they did. As much as I hate admitting this, it traumatized me. For years, I couldn't go near a beach at night. I couldn't talk to strangers without my mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. Every normal interaction felt like a potential threat. I withdrew. I drifted from the girls for a while, emotionally checked out from everything. I lost my trust in the world. Luckily, things have gotten better. With time, therapy, and effort, I've slowly come back to myself. So have the girls. We're in regular contact now, and while we rarely speak about that night, there's a quiet understanding between us, something unspoken that bonds us permanently. I still can't begin to imagine how this affected Thea and Sabrina. Part of me wonders if not remembering is, in a twisted way, a blessing. I hope it is. But the thing that still haunts me, the part that gives me chills even now, is how close we came to losing them. If I hadn't gone back to the house, if I hadn't answered that call, if I hadn't reached Lindsay's car in time, they might have disappeared. And no one would have ever known what really happened. Which of these stories did you find the creepiest? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever been through something terrifying like this, send me your story, maybe your experience will be featured in the next video. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. Because the next story might just be happening near you.